Hi everyone, I'm Sudeshna from theabundancepsyche.com. If you are new here, my website is theabundancepsyche.com and I help people find their dream careers and present their best selves in the world. I also work full time as a corporate employee and have worked in top consulting houses across the world, and also obviously because of being in this personal development space, I talk to a lot of inspirational people, one of whom is here with me today, the very talented Michelle Perry. Michelle established herself as a subject matter expert over the course of a career as a clinical social worker that spanned over 20 years. Michelle then transitioned into the corporate business world where her leadership and coaching skills were refined, producing results in all that she worked with. After almost falling out of high school, Michelle earned an Ivy League master's degree in advanced clinical social work from Columbia University after earning a bachelor's degree in human development and social work with an education focusing from Wheelock College, which is, by the way, a school within Boston University. Her formal education with a life of victory over trauma and loss, financial hardship, and a complete mindset transformation has equipped her and enhanced her skills as a life empowerment coach. Michelle uses these skills based on cognitive behavioral empowerment approaches to contribute to the journey of others who are able to seek results and experience an increase in confidence and momentum in their lives. Wow. Michelle, welcome to the show.
I'm so glad to be here. You did very well getting through that.
I almost want to start at the very beginning. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, I am so excited to be here. And we had a great conversation before this, and I'm excited. You're going to be on the Successful Diligence podcast as well. So we'll both get to share. But for me, it's been a very long journey. I know I look very youthful, but I'm a little bit older. So I've been through a lot of different seasons in life. And when I was younger, my parents divorced when I was about 3. And so that sort of started my life trajectory into a sort of negative-ish place, because I started to make very poor choices based on low self-esteem and not having the attention of a father and not knowing what that was like. And my mom worked very, very hard, did all the best that she could, but she was always working a lot. So I was alone a lot of the time, sort of left to my own devices, which is not always the greatest thing for a young child and adolescent. But so I made some very bad choices, and like you read in my bio, almost failed out of high school. And I did get accepted to college, which was a miracle. And I made the choice when I went to college that, what if I just try? I mean, let me just see, because I don't know anybody. Let me just see if I try. And I ended up getting straight A's every semester, every year of undergraduate, which then allowed me to get into graduate school to Columbia University. So yeah, so from there I went into, my career, and sort of, we can get more into that as well, about how I transitioned out of that career into another and why and all that stuff.
Yeah, so tell us, how did you get into social work to start with?
Yeah, so I told you I struggled a lot in high school, and I really didn't have a great sense about what I wanted to do in life. I didn't have, mentors or anybody to sort of talk with me, and I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I was just hanging out and, partying,
Mm,
living the life until January 2nd of 1992. And I remember that date, and I will always remember that date because it was my last year of high school, and we had just got back from our holiday break, and we were all just chatting and talking. And I had been with this group of students throughout my whole, high school career. So we all knew each other. And there was a boy in the class who everybody knew. He was not very liked. He didn't stand out. He was quiet and he didn't really talk a lot. No one really paid attention to him. No one really talked to him. And on this day, January 2nd, 1992, He sat in the back corner of our English class, and he had a white styrofoam cup. And I remember looking over at him, and I saw him stirring it with a pencil, and he had this smile on his face. And I remember being surprised, like, wow, he never smiles. I wonder why he's smiling. And then I just went back to my conversation and didn't think about it. And what ended up happening is that he had cyanide in that cup, and he drank it. And he started convulsing and having, whatever cyanide burns like the inside of you. And so it was literally burning his insides. And he ended up dying in that classroom in front of us. So like they tried to get us out of the room, as he was convulsing and on the floor and foaming at the mouth and all of this. And I was the last person out of the room. And so I actually saw him die. And of course, being 17 years old, that's traumatic, number one. And then it left such an imprint on my life because, they brought in the counselors to talk to us, and then they dedicated the gym, after him, and they, planted a tree in his name. And I remember being so angry, not at him, but at us, the people, left behind, and all of this great things we were doing for him, but he was gone. Like, why didn't we pay attention to him when he was alive, when he could have benefited? And maybe if one of us had given him some attention or talked to him or shown him some kindness, he may not have chosen to take his life. And so that incident is what propelled me into a life of service, because it was so traumatic for me that I said, I don't want anyone to ever feel that much despair because they feel alone or don't have anyone to pay attention to them, that I'm going to be that person. I'm going to pay attention to everybody, anybody that I meet. If I see you on the street, I'm going to give you a smile, make eye contact. And I dedicated my life to paying attention to other people, to be of service, and to make sure that as much as I could prevent someone else from being in that despair enough to want to take their life. And so that was really what got me into social work and social service. I worked with kids and families in the foster care system, most of whom are really forgotten, neglected, abused, those kids who nobody pays attention to, who, if they do get paid attention to, sometimes it's the wrong kind of attention. And I dedicated my life to really serving those kids and families, to be an agent of good so that nobody else would have to suffer from a lack of attention. So that's really what got me into social work.
Oh my God, that's the second time you've told me this story, and I still have goosebumps. Um,
Yeah.
well, I mean, it's really so sad that we don't pay attention when we really need to, and that's to do with these kids in foster care homes, or even in our lives in general. Like, um, especially in today's day and age, as I'm sitting and chatting to you, who's sitting right next to me, we are on our mobiles, we are not paying attention to what we are eating because the TV is on. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Something or the other is always there to make us almost practice the art of distraction in some ways, I think. So,
Yeah. I think the world is set up for that, though. I think that, and especially now with COVID and having to be so technological and we can't get together, there's so much to distract us. And I don't think people understand the power of attention. It's such a gift when you can actually give another person undivided attention. There's such a gift in that, because the power of being heard and being seen is tremendous. And I don't think people really understand how powerful that can be. And it's very small, and it can make such a huge difference. Not only paying attention to other people, but like you said, paying attention to ourselves. What are we eating? What are we drinking? Are we being healthy? Are we taking time to meditate or refresh ourselves, so that we have our cup full to give to other people? It's so important to pay attention.
and how do you pay more attention, and how have you paid, I suppose, more attention to both yourself and also to the 20 years of social service that you did?
Yeah, so it's funny because so about I guess it's 7.5 years ago, 7 years ago, I was a national consultant, and so I got recruited to Texas, where I'm in the United States in Texas, and I was working for a company. It was abuse prevention, and I was traveling all over the world, not taking care of myself, not eating right, on planes all the time, tired. My husband wasn't getting a lot of my attention. And he said to me one day, you're not the person I married. This is not the woman that I married. You're sort of becoming like a crazy person. You've got all this stress. I never see you. This is not working for me. And I had to really do some reflection about, is this the life I want to live? And when I thought about it, every goal that I had for myself, I met. I did everything I wanted to do in social work. I, helped as many people as I could in that way. And so I made the decision to transition out of social work, and I actually took a corporate job in corporate America, which I never thought I would do. I don't have an MBA. I didn't have any other business experience. I was just sort of like, well, I started as a customer service agent. I was like, well, I could help customers, that's sort of, transferable skills. And then I was successful and worked my way up in the company. I'm now an analyst. But it's interesting because from moving from social work to corporate, I still had those clinical skills. I still had that passion to pay attention to people. And what ended up happening is I was the one paying attention to my coworkers who needed someone to talk to and support and encouragement. And people then started to pay me for coaching. Like, I didn't realize that's what I was doing. Oh, I think my phone's ringing. But I actually started coaching them. And then I was just doing it because that's what I do. And they started to pay me for it. And I said, oh, this is interesting. I like money. So I'll take the money. But I developed a coaching business from that. And then that kind of evolved into my podcast and my school and different programming. So it's paying attention to what was not working in my life, not eating right, not sleeping well, not paying attention to my husband and our relationship. Mentally, I was just all over the place and stressed. I was able to make a decision that changed my life for the good and allowed me to be refreshed so I could help more people just in a different way. So that was sort of my exit out.
I like that insight because like you so rightly say that you cannot pour from a cup that's not full, and social care takes a lot out of you in that respect. So tell us a bit more about, I suppose, the resilience that you built during your social work career.
So ask me that again.
So I imagine that doing a lot of the social care work,
Mm-hmm.
you had to almost listen to stories that were traumatic, and um, because we all want to help, we almost personally feel identified with the person we are helping, the victim in some cases. And I feel like that scars us in so many more ways that without very strong resilience, you would be struggling almost. So, are there
Yeah.
any tips and tricks you use to build up a resilient system around you, or
Oh,
is there something
absolutely.
to that?
There's no way I would have lasted 20 years if I didn't have, because especially when you're in clinical work, it's sort of like therapy and you get very intimate stories, and the things that people do to their children is horrific. Like, you can't imagine sort of what you see. And I dealt with, sexual abuse, serious injury, child death, so really heavy stuff. And the reasons that people do these things come from a place of pain a lot of the time. And not saying it's right, but the whole entire family system is traumatized. And so when you're working with traumatized people, what happens is you sort of bear the burden and absorb a lot of that. And it's called vicarious traumatization. And I had to learn about that because I was feeling it and I was absorbing all of that trauma and those negative emotions and all of those feelings, and then feeling helpless. And I was like, what is going on? Because I know these are not my issues, but I'm still feeling it. And that was when I started to learn about vicarious traumatization. And then I was able to say, okay, this is not my stuff, sort of to say. And I had to begin to learn what self-care is, and not like, the manicures and the pedicures and getting your hair done, but like the true self-care, taking care of myself. And that took a lot of work because I was so used to caring for other people. I wasn't used to caring for myself and what that looked like. And a lot of it was putting up boundaries, saying, I've had enough. I can't listen anymore. It's too much. I need to take a break. Making sure that I, was hydrated with water, was eating the right things, was sleeping enough, because when we sleep, our body regenerates and we're able to process mentally a lot of things. Like when we sleep, our brain is actually categorizing our day and our memories so that we can move forward. And so if we don't get enough sleep, all of that sort of stays all jumbled up in us and can, we carry that with us. And so and then I also started to journal, and journaling for me was a way to get it out. So I would literally just start writing and brain dump and just get everything out. I wouldn't judge it, because I think a lot of times when we have negative emotions, we judge them, and that's not helpful. Emotions are just sort of indicators. It tells you where you are. And then when you know where you are, you can make a different choice to be somewhere different. So if I'm angry, or if I'm angry at a parent for doing something to their child, it's a feeling. I'm not going to judge that feeling. But when I get that out and process it, and I journal and I go to sleep and I can sort of let my mind process, maybe take a walk, then I'm able to infuse some compassion for the parent and say, okay, well, parents usually don't just abuse their kids when that's just not what parents typically do. So something happened to this person to where they felt that was what they had to do in response to their child. So let me infuse some compassion instead of being so angry and try to understand. And that allowed me to then not co-sign on it because it's still wrong, but at least to understand, so I could work with that parent in a way that was coming from a place of compassion rather than anger. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. So that's basically putting a bit of distance between your emotions and yourself.
Yeah, but still feel, because you have to feel your emotions. A lot of times we emotions are messy, and they're not always comfortable. But I found that I had to tell the truth, because a lot of times I would sort of try to self-deceive. So I'd be like, oh, I'm not angry. I'm just upset, or I'm just, worried. No, I was angry, sort of like when that boy took his life and we were celebrating him after. I was angry. It took me years to process that. I had to write stories about it because I'm a writer. So, I wrote, short stories, I journaled, I had to talk about it. Sometimes walking helps also, because as I'm walking, I have a phrase that I use. It's called keep walking. And I say that to myself all the time, because as you walk in life and as you walk out your journey, you walk through things, out of, and then into new things. And so that metaphor for me was really helpful, because I could sort of process the emotions. I would tell the truth. I would be honest. This is how I'm feeling. Okay, now what am I going to do with that feeling? I have to make a choice, because I choose how to behave. I choose what I'm going to do with that. I didn't want to be miserable and angry for life. So, okay, how do I process this? Well, writing helps. Let me write it out. Let me take care of myself. And then let me choose to put good in the world, so that there's more good, at least from me, than there is bad coming from other people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's interesting because when we think, we typically think really, really fast. But the moment we have to write something down, it slows down our thought process, and then you can
Yes.
kind of make the decision, like you said, about is this what I want it to sound like or be like, or is this what I want it to mean?
Yeah,
Um,
and thinking is, when we think about our thoughts, and it's funny because I had to learn this as well, is that thinking is asking questions. Like when you have a thought, you're asking a question, what is this that I'm feeling, or what is this stimuli that's coming in? How do I, your brain is trying to categorize it. Where do I put it? Is it something that's I should be scared of and fearful of? Is it something pleasurable and something that I like? Do I want to repeat this? Do I never want to see this again? And so when we're conscious about our thoughts, that's when we can be active in choosing what to do with them. Because every thought that comes into your head, you don't have to accept it. I can be angry and want to go hit something, but just because I have that thought doesn't mean I need to act upon it. I could say, well, okay, I acknowledge that thought. I'm going to dismiss that thought because it's not helpful. It's not serving me. And I'm going to replace that thought with something else. And we can do that when we are conscious about our thinking and what we're thinking. And sometimes when we're starting to learn that, it, like you said, our minds are going so fast that we have to slow ourselves down. And writing is a way to slow it down because it takes, moments to go from head to pen to paper, so it does help.
Right. So as you were speaking, Michelle, I was just wondering about, not all parents are like that, but some parents are like that. And there's an apparent, I think in psychology, they use the word cognitive dissonance.
Mm-hmm.
So, is there a way that you have found maybe to deal with different sorts of cognitive dissonance in some ways that it doesn't have to fit into category A or category B. There can be like various shades in between A and B. There are a spectrum of colors. But like you said, our brain tries to categorize them into buckets, which also is probably why um, we have a ton of issues in society. Like right now, whatever is happening in the US, it's scary. But is there a way that we can be more comfortable knowing that one does not need to be better than the other, one does not need to be the truth versus the other, both can be truths in their own rights?
Yeah, and it's very complex and dimensional what's going on in the US, and there's a lot of emotion, which, emotion doesn't have thought. Like you can feel something and there's not a rational thought to it. And, you're right. Sometimes there's not a right or wrong, there's gray, or there's, there's a different spectrum for people. But I think what's key is to take shame and judgment out, because a lot of times it takes us longer to tell the truth and to acknowledge when we put shame and judgment onto something. And even when it's a wrong behavior, my mother said something to me when I was growing up, because as I said, I was a rough kind of kid. And she would always say to me, I love you, but I don't love what you're doing. And what that taught me was that my behavior was different from me, the person. And that lesson is something that's not always taught, I think, to everybody. But it's so important to learn that we have behaviors, but those behaviors are not who we are as a person. And we as a person can choose and be empowered over our behaviors, and we can change. We're not stuck as one person. We're not stuck in one emotion. We're not stuck in one thought. And it's okay to have conflicting thoughts or conflicting emotions. I can be angry and sad at the same time. I can be grateful and angry at the same time. So, for example, with what's going on in the US with all of the racial stuff, I am angry, but I'm also really grateful because this opportunity is here for people to have raw, honest conversations that weren't happening before. And they would not have happened if the horrible thing that did happen didn't happen. I said happen a lot, but it gave an opportunity. So this horrible event produced an opportunity of high emotion, high volatility, but it also created an opportunity for honest, raw emotion and collaboration from people that had no awareness before. So you can feel two different things at the same time. It's what we choose to do with those emotions that matters.
Right. Okay, that's great insight. And then how do we bring back, I suppose, the attention to the decision that we have chosen to go ahead with? So, for example, obviously, we want to be choosing a better society forward, a better life, a better career, whatever it is the decision is that we have chosen in that moment of conflict. But obviously, our brain knows that there's this other element as well, and we are angry or we are sad, we are whatever other negative emotions that we are feeling, how do you then almost divert and channelize your attention to the more constructive and productive part of it? Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's about being intentional. You know, when you learn something, you can't unlearn it, right? You can teach yourself something different about it, but once you see something, once you know something, it's there, it's in your database, you know? And so being intentional about being conscious of what is in your mind and what your choices are, and being intentional about either changing the thoughts that are not serving you or embracing new things that are serving you, and being very, very intentional about the choices that you make, what you do with that emotion, what you do with that behavior, and what you want to do, what you want to learn, what you want to contribute. That's the key, is being very intentional about it. And it's a slow process. It's not overnight. So being kind to yourself and giving yourself some grace and understanding, and again, taking that judgment and that shame out of it, and just keep walking forward in the best way that you know how, knowing that as you learn more, you can do more, you get better. So being intentional about it, I think, is the key.
That's great. And do you have any tips on how you can be more intentional?
I think it's paying attention. Because when you pay attention, what you're doing is you are consciously diverting your senses and your attention to a specific thing. So, you know, I have dogs, and if I ignore them, they may have an accident in the house, which I don't want, right? So I need to pay attention to how they're behaving. You know, are they just sleeping? Are they sort of pacing around? Is it that they're hungry? Is it that they're thirsty? You know, if I say to them, oh, do you want to go out? And they get all excited, I'm paying attention to their reaction. Oh, they need to go out, so I can make a decision. So paying attention to our thoughts and how we react. You know, there's a lot of times where I'll read something or I'll see something, and actually this happened 2 days ago. I read someone's post on Facebook, and it came from a person that I had different expectations. I didn't think that this person would post what they did, and my reaction to the post surprised me. So I read the post and I got really, really angry. And I'm not an angry person at all. Like, I've said angry a lot in this episode, but I'm really not an angry person. So when anger sort of bubbles up in me, I get very surprised, because I'm like, well, where did that come from? And so I paid attention to how I felt, and I said, well, okay, I need to figure out what's going on with me. So I paid attention to the emotion, and then I chose to dig deeper and ask myself different questions. Why am I responding this way? What is it about what this person wrote that caused that reaction? Okay, so if I'm feeling angry about this word or this sentence, why am I feeling angry about that? Okay, well, that brought up a whole nother, set of questions, because, well, that dug into something I wasn't conscious of, that was being brought to my consciousness based on that reaction. Okay, well, that's something to explore. So I had to, do some journaling, and I had to do some meditation and some quiet time. And I was able to process through, because I paid attention to my reaction, my thoughts, and then I chose what to do with them. And so it took me 2 days to respond, because I wanted to respond with kindness and with understanding. I didn't want to meet the post with the same, angry emotion that it caused in me. And I was able to do that, which then promotes understanding and conversation versus division and arguments, which was what my intention was to promote conversation rather than an argument, because that's not helpful from my perspective.
Right. Okay. You know what? I love this. And on the internet, when you find comments that you probably get really angry about, sad about, depressed with, or happy about, you can almost choose to reply or not in a given time frame, or you can take longer than you want it to take. However, at times in life, we don't have that much time when someone says something really mean to you, rude to you. How do you then practice, I suppose, the discipline of standing back, paying attention to your thoughts and then responding instead of reacting. Does that
Yeah, and
make sense?
I'm not perfect, so let's not pretend this happens all 100% of the time. But what I find is that because I've been practicing paying attention and incorporating the habits of intentional thought and choosing my reactions and behaviors, it's sort of a habit now for me, and my brain has been trained on how I prefer it to respond. So I've trained it to ask different questions, to take a minute. So when someone like in person, let's say, we were having a conversation in person and someone says something extremely rude, and I've had this with someone in authority, my supervisor said something extremely rude that I was not okay with. And in the moment, I didn't have, a couple days to respond. So what I did was I said, wow, that was rude. That was my initial, response. And then I said, give me a moment because I don't want to respond to you with what's coming into my brain right now. So if you give me a moment, I'll respond to you. And I took a moment, took a deep breath because paying attention to my body, I was very tense. My temperature was rising. I was getting very red. And so I took a moment to deep breathe, sort of calm myself down on the inside, count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, take a deep breath. And then I was able to infuse some calmness and then respond in the moment the best that I could. Reminding myself on the inside, be respectful. So even as I was talking to the supervisor in response, I was telling myself in my head, be respectful, be respectful, be respectful, so that I wouldn't add to the conflict. So it takes a lot of training, and again, it's paying attention and being intentional. And after you do that so many times, your brain and your body responds a lot quicker because it's a habit.
Right. Yeah, like everything, I think attention's also a muscle that you develop and you keep on practicing and you get better and better at it. So you
Exactly, a muscle. I love that. I love that analogy, the muscle, because you don't go to the gym and lift up, 150 pounds. You start with the 10 pound and you
Mm.
build up. So it is like a muscle.
So how long have you been meditating? Because I heard you say a number of times about meditation. Has that increased your attention span? Has the amount of time you have been meditating increased over the years, or how has that helped?
Yeah, and when I say meditating, it's not like the traditional type of
Okay.
meditation.
Okay.
I do believe in God. I'm a Messianic Jew, so it's a whole nother conversation. But so I do a lot of prayer, but I do traditional prayer. But for me, like the quiet time is that sort of meditation, quiet prayer time. And so for me, it is sort of repeating affirmations and repeating positive frames, like frame of reference. So if a situation can be taken one of two ways, I'll repeat to myself, this is an opportunity for growth. This is a learning opportunity. Even if I don't feel that it is, this is a learning opportunity, Michelle. So in my quiet time, I'm repeating that to myself until I start to believe it and it infuses into my thought process. And I didn't always pray. I didn't always take quiet time. I didn't always, have that time for myself. As I mentioned, I was so busy and I was paying attention to everybody else, I didn't even know that I needed that. So it actually started with taking walks and just being in nature and taking a walk by myself so that there was no one else to talk to and I was left with my thoughts. And that was when I began to realize the type of thoughts that I had. And I didn't always realize what I was thinking. And I was like, wow, some of these thoughts are really not productive. Like I need to work on this. So I had to get intentional. And so I think I've been having quiet time, I would say for like the last 12 years, but it's really only been super, super intentional within the last like 7 or 8 years, I would say. So it's definitely a practice that was slow to start, sort of like journaling. I would journal one day, next day, and then I'd leave it for a week and a half or a month. Oh, wait, I got to pick up the journal again. So it's like a muscle. You have to train yourself to do it. And I had to be intentional about blocking off the time and
Mm.
allowing myself the grace that it doesn't have to be an hour to start with. I can take 5 minutes and literally put the stopwatch 5 minutes and I'm done, you know? And so in that 5 minutes, the first couple times it, I thought it wasn't effective. but it actually was, because in that 5 minutes, I didn't get anything resolved. My thoughts were running all over the place. Everything was all over. But what it did was it set me up for a consistent, disciplined practice.
Mm.
And with consistency and discipline, that's when the improvement was able to come. So as long as I showed up, eventually it became a practice that was implemented successfully.
I love that insight because that's what we tend to do. Oh, I have to go to the gym for 21 days for what, 1.5 hours, and run on the treadmill for 45 minutes every day, plus some. Like, we have so much expectations when we just could just say, well, 5 minutes, one day, that's it, over and
Right.
out. That's so much easier to start as opposed to start on that whole journey of too many expectations and almost setting yourself up for failure in some ways.
Exactly. And I had to actually teach myself how to set myself up for success.
Mm,
And, when there's a project, how do you finish it? You do it one step at a time, one thing at a time, and then you build on it, and it gets easier as you continue to do it.
yeah, yeah. Okay. And tell us a bit more about your current work and how this focus on attention has actually helped your corporate career as well.
Yeah. Well, paying attention corporate wise has allowed me to be promoted. Goodness, I want to say 3 times in like 2 years or something. And then
Wow.
and actually, I took a salary cut when I went to corporate from social work, because I was a national consultant making, the money. And going to corporate, I had to start from the bottom. But within 4 years, I was making more in corporate than I was when I left social work. And that was
Wow.
because I paid attention to what is the outcomes that they're looking for, what are the behaviors they want, and then I set out to do it. And I was
Mm,
intentional. When the coaching came, I had to pay attention to, number one, wow, this is something people want. This is something people will pay me for. This is something they need. Wow, let me jump on this, because it presented itself, and I had the awareness to pay attention and, like, okay, this is an opportunity for me to
yeah.
serve and to give in a different way. And that has been such a blessing. And then from the coaching came the podcast. And I had no idea about podcasting, had never thought about it at all. And I talked with 2 people, and they sort of, gave me some of the background, and this is how you do it, and it's not that hard, and blah, blah. And so in 2019, I started the podcast. And I had no idea it would be received as well as it has. I mean, I got so much positive feedback and encouragement, and the listeners were wanting more. And so I listened, I paid attention to what they were saying, and that led to the school and the different courses. So I have a course on gratitude, I have a course on mindset, I have a course on legacy, I have my transformation course, which is my signature course. So all of that came from paying attention and listening to what was being brought to me. And as I paid attention to it, I also paid attention to how I responded. There were opportunities that came that I wasn't so excited about. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that. But like the podcasting, I was like, oh, I got so excited. And I was like, yeah, let's go for it. The school and the courses, I got really excited. So I was like, oh, okay, this is good. Let me go for it. So paying attention to how I responded and honoring that, and not judging it and saying, okay, well, if this is not the path I want to go down, that's okay, because there's something else for me. And this is what really lights me up and gives me joy and allows me to serve. And I get excited. Well, okay, this is where I'm going to choose to go.
Oh, I love that anecdote because you know what? I always tend to say that lucky people are lucky because they tend to identify opportunities. And I think inherently connected with that almost is attention and the headspace to have enough space and holding out enough space to identify that opportunity and act on it. I guess that's
Yeah.
what, yeah,
Lucky
that's what
people
you
pay
did.
attention to the doors that open. So like you think, oh, they're so lucky. Well, or, oh, they had an overnight success. Well, 10 years ago, they recognized that they like to do this. So they started to build their skill in it, and they
Mm,
paid attention to the opportunities that came. So for example, I told you I love to write, right? I've always loved writing. I've always journaled, and I've always had stories to tell. So in the past, people have said to me, oh, you should write a book. Oh, you should write a book. No. So I heard it. Okay. I sort of file it away. But recently, that concept has been coming up a lot more, like within the last 9 months. And so I'm starting to pay attention to that now. Like, well, maybe this is the season now to write my book. And I'm paying attention to how I feel about that. I'm paying attention to the opportunities that are presenting themselves and saying, well, opportunity after opportunity, person after person, maybe there's something I need to really dive into, but it's because I'm paying attention to what's going on around me and what's being brought to me. I think that a lot of times people don't pay attention to the clues that are brought to them, and they don't listen for the opportunity all the time, because I believe that everybody is here on earth for a purpose. There's a reason you were born. There's a reason you were born in the time frame and the season that you were in, the decade that you were born in. There are people that need to hear your voice and your story, and there's a reason why you are the way you are. There's a reason why you think the way you do and I think the way I do. There's a reason why, I have chosen to do certain things in life, and not like, I didn't choose to become an astronaut, even though I was excited about going to the moon and the stars. I'm
Mm.
really bad at math, so that was a good choice. And paying attention to, this is where I'm skilled and this is where I'm not so great. And that's okay. It helps me to refine and sort of reveal to myself what my purpose is and uncover in that what I'm supposed to do so that other people can benefit from my life and what I have to offer. So I think that people who say, oh, they're just lucky, well, they've been paying attention to the signs and to the opportunities that are being brought to them. And then they have the courage to take advantage of them, because it takes courage to step out and do something that might feel weird or might feel uncomfortable. It takes a lot of courage to do that. And courage is a muscle as well. You start off by doing something terrified, scared to the bone, heart beating in your chest. All you can hear is your heart in your head, but you do it. And then once you do it, you get confidence to do it again. And then you get confidence to do it again. And eventually that fear is less and the courage is more.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And tell us a bit more about your journey to becoming a coach, and then your school and the podcast. Because, like you said, courage is a muscle as well. And I'm sure that you have had your fair share of critics. All of us in the space, we know what it's like. People don't talk about it openly enough, but it's interesting that you mentioned courage, and I almost want to rip that apart a bit.
Yeah. I mean, and especially now with everybody being at home and there's a boom of start your own business, be a coach. And what a coach is different than a mentor. It's different than a therapist. There's a specific skill set of being a coach, and not everybody is good at it. And not everybody should be a coach. You can get into the space for different reasons, but to be effective and to be a person of integrity, because I've had, so when people started to pay me and I was coaching, and because I'd been a therapist, I knew I didn't want to be a therapist, but I was still doing the coaching without really recognizing that's what I was doing. And when people started to pay me, I said, okay, there's an opportunity here. Let me investigate. So I did some research. I hired a coach. I took some online courses myself, and they were good. And my frame is, it was a great learning opportunity. It introduced me to the space, even though that coach and that online course creator overpromised and underdelivered. And I paid a lot of money and did not get the quality that I thought perhaps that money deserved, which, it was my choice to pay for the program. I learned a lot. And I decided I'm not going to be like that. In my business, I'm going to over deliver and under promise. So I'm going to tell you what I offer, but then when you get into my world, you're going to get more than what you paid for, because you're going to get a result and you're going to understand that I'm going to support you in that journey and encourage you in that journey. I'm not going to do it for you, but I'm going to encourage you and support you and give you the skills and equip you to do it and support you on your journey of courage. And as you discover your talents and your gifts, and help you pay attention to those opportunities that come when you start to walk in that. And so I'm very intentional about staying away from sort of a lot of those messages that people have in the coaching space. And I am very intentional about sticking with my lane, my intention, my purpose, because I know that the people that I'm supposed to serve, they will find me, they will resonate with me, and they will come into my world and allow me to serve them, and then go on to be their best version of themselves and find their success. And I truly believe that. So I don't get into the competitiveness or the pettiness or any of that. I find the programs that work for me. You know, there's different platforms for the online courses. I found the one that I like. People don't like it and have things to say. That's fine. It works for me. You know, if something else works for you, go do it. And great. You know, I celebrate you on that.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm going to choose to stay in that positive framework,
Yeah.
and I'm going to give out of the best of me, and I'm going to run my business with integrity, and I'm going to give and serve in that way. And I'm not going to be competitive. And if you try to draw me into that, I'm going to pay attention, and I'm going to say, no, not for me. And then I'll pivot.
Amazing. I love it. And when people want to find you to your courses, where can they find your courses? How can they find out more about you?
Yeah, so successfuldiligence.com has links to all the things. So when you go to successfuldiligence.com, there'll be a little pop-up to get onto the newsletter. And my newsletter is really, it's sort of like a mini course. I'm very intentional about what I put in the newsletter. It comes out once a week on Wednesdays, only one time a week, and we don't bombard you with emails. But it also gives you all of the links to the school and the podcast. And on the website, there's the podcast link and the school. The podcast is on all of the major, podcast platforms. The school, it's successful/diligence.teachable.com, but there's a link to it on the website as well. But Successful Diligence is really successfuldiligence.com is how you find all the things.
Brilliant. And I will link all of those in the show notes below. And Michelle, any parting thoughts?
I would say that if you make an intention to pay attention, so if you're conscious about paying attention to yourself and to the world around you, I think that people would be very surprised in a good way about the significant positive change that will come to their life, and to always stay open to the opportunities that present themselves. And I always say, keep walking, never stop, always keep walking, because you will reach your destiny if you just keep walking.
Yeah, just keep walking and you'll reach your destiny. Love it. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Michelle, for agreeing to do this. This has been an absolute pleasure. Learned a lot, and I'm sure the rest of our viewers did as well. So
This
stay
was such an
tuned.
honor. Thank you so much for the invitation. It was such an honor. And yeah,
Lovely chatting. Okay, bye now.
bye everyone.